Good morning, class. So today we start with Aurangzeb. I want you to open up to page number 83. Now, different sites that I checked, most of the sites, only one or two sites claim that Aurangzeb ascended the throne in 1659. But let us go according to what information is given in the book. It is 1658. It was somewhere in the month of July. Aurangzeb ascended the throne after a long and fierce struggle with his father and three brothers. It is said, though he was a very devout Muslim, but he was a very cruel man. His long reign of 50 years was devoted to wars in different parts of the country. So most of the time he was trying to keep a hold on his vast empire. At its height, his rule extended over almost the entire subcontinent, from Kashmir in the north to River Kaveri in the south, and from Kabul in the west to Chittagong in the east. There is a map given over here which shows the extent of the Mughal Empire during Aurangzeb's time. Now, his worst decision was reversing of Akbar's policy of religious tolerance. He spent the last days of his reign attempting to suppress rebellions. Under Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire reached its largest extent, but also witnessed a series of political disturbances. Aurangzeb died in 1707. He left behind an empire which was on the verge of collapse. Now, this was mostly because of during Akbar's time, all the Rajputs, that we studied about that Akbar got into marriage alliances with most of the Rajput kings, and not only were these ladies and their religion honored, but even their kinsmen, that is, their family members, were given important roles to perform during Akbar's reign. Now, one more thing was very important during Akbar's reign, that best jobs or top jobs or any kind of responsible job was given to the person who was competent for it. It was not based on religion. So these were some of the major reasons why Aurangzeb had to face so much of rebellion from different quarters. Now, let us study about the administrative system of the Mughals. Children, I have underlined certain lines, so all these are very important. Make sure that you also underline as well. The Mughal emperors established a centralized state based on military power. It rested on two pillars: the absolute authority of the emperor and the strength of the army. However, the Mughal rulers made a conscious attempt to accommodate the different traditions prevalent in the country. So till the time Aurangzeb ascended the throne, this was the policy that they adopted, the Mughals adopted. Now, monarch, that is the king. There are a number of references in the court chronicles of the Mughals which show that the power of the Mughal kings came directly from God, that they were essentially blessed and they had special powers given by God which made them such good rulers, such strong rulers. Now, according to Abul Fazl, the office of a true ruler was a very responsible one which depended on divine illumination. All this was, Abul Fazl, we know he wrote during Akbar's time, and Akbar was a very just ruler. So when he says that the office of a true ruler was a very responsible one and depended on divine illumination, then he is not wrong, because though Akbar was an illiterate man, but he was very wise as an emperor. Thus, the Mughal emperor, endowed with the divine light, was regarded as the wise regent of God on earth. He ruled the empire with paternal love towards his subjects without distinction of sect or creed. The emperor was the head of the executive, legislature, judiciary and the army. He was the supreme commander of the armed forces, and all other commanders were appointed and removed by him. So he was the supreme commander. All authority vested in the monarch. He made laws and issued administrative ordinances. The royal uzuk, that is the small single ring, was affixed to farmans. Farmans are orders issued by the authority, especially the king, granting appointments, titles, jagirs, etc. Now, ministers. In the days of Babur and Humayun, there used to be Prime Minister known as Wakil, who was entrusted with large powers in civil and military affairs. During the early years of Akbar's reign, Behram Khan was the Wakil. However, after Behram Khan's death, the office of Wakil was stripped of all its powers and it became more or less honorary. So they did not have any real power as such, though Wakils were still being appointed. The head of the revenue department was the Wazir, known as Diwan or Diwan-e-Ala. The Diwan was responsible for all income and expenditure. So after the king, he was one of the most important person because he controlled the treasury. The head of the military department was called the Mir Bakshi or the Mir Baksh. The Mir Bakshi was also the head of the intelligence and information agencies of the empire. So he was the one who made sure that the empire was strong at all times and there were no kinds of rebellions coming up within the state, within the empire, or there were no outside enemies as such. Now, judiciary. The judicial department was headed by the Qazi. This post was sometimes combined with that of the chief Sadr, who was responsible for all charitable and religious matters. Now, provincial government. Akbar paid great attention to the organization of the provincial government. The empire was divided into 12 provinces or subas, which was further subdivided into sarkars, and each sarkar into parganas or mahals. Each suba was headed by one governor who was called the subedar or sipasalar or nazim or nazim. He was usually a mansabdar of high rank. His functions included maintenance of law and order, enforcement of imperial decrees, orders that is, administration of criminal justice and the smooth collection of revenue. The provincial Diwan was in charge of revenue administration of the province. His responsibilities were similar to those of the central Diwan. Beside the Subedar and the Diwan, the other important officials in the province were Faujdar, Kotwal, Bakshi, Sadr Qazi and Mutasib. Now the center appointed the officials of the provinces, sarkars and parganas. Hence these divisions were directly responsible to the center. They were directly reporting to the central, that is to the monarch. Now children, the timeline given on page number 84, timeline during the Mughal Empire given over here is very important. Please make sure that you know each and every date and the event by heart. Now the Mansabdari system. This is a very important topic, children, so you need to learn it by heart. And it was introduced by Akbar. It was an administrative system of the Mughal Empire. Under this system, every officer was assigned a rank. What is that? A mansab. Thus the term Mansabdar means rank holder, refers to an individual who holds a mansab, meaning a position or rank. The Mansabdars formed the ruling group in the Mughal Empire. So they were the ones who were responsible for helping the king in thrashing out the important rules and regulations to run or to look into the administration of the empire. Almost the whole nobility, the bureaucracy as well as the military hierarchy had mansabs. Everybody had those ranks. The lowest rank in the system was 10 and the highest was 5,000 for nobles. It was a grading system used by the Mughals to fix rank, salary and military responsibility. So according to the jobs given to these nobles, their ranks were fixed. These ranks were divided into two, namely Zat and Sawar. Zat fixed the personal status of a person and the salary due to him. The higher the Zat, the more prestigious was the noble's position in court and the larger his salary. So it goes without saying. Now the Savar rank indicated the number of cavalrymen or Savar a Mansabdar was required to maintain. A Savar means a person who rides or sits. For every 10 cavalrymen, the Mansabdar had to maintain 20 horses. So this was what Akbar had introduced. Now later on, the later emperors made some changes to it. So that we'll come to shortly. The Mansabdars received their salaries as revenue assignments called Jagirs. So they were given some land holdings, and from where they were earning their revenues, from which they used to pay the king also, and they were maintaining their army and using it for their personal use. However, most of the Mansabdars did not actually reside in or administer their Jagirs. They had left it under their managers, and they were residing somewhere else or performing their duties somewhere else in the kingdom. They only had rights to the revenue of their assignments, which was collected from them by their servants, while the Mansabdars themselves served in some other part of the country. Now Jahangir maintained the Mansabdari system developed by Akbar, but he reduced the average rate of Zat salary from 240 to 200 per annum annually. Now Shah Jahan reduced the number of Savars a noble was required to maintain. So according to the times, according to their thinking, their opinions, the later rulers, the later emperors made a change in the Mansabdari system. Thus, a noble was expected to maintain a quota of only 1/3 of his Savar rank, and in some cases 1/4. Now, during the reign of Aurangzeb, there was a huge increase in the number of Mansabdars. So, their salaries and all were not increased, but the number of Mansabdars or the people holding ranks were increased. These and other factors created a shortage in the number of Jagirs. Now, children, one reason can be because the extent of Aurangzeb's empire was huge, and he required all these people who, noblemen or officers holding ranks to look into various aspects of the administration. Now, when he had created so many Mansabdars, he had to provide them with land holdings also. So as a result, there was a shortage in the number of Jagirs. Now the land revenue system. A uniform system of measurement was established for calculating the land tax. So this was uniform all over the kingdom. Todarmal, Raja Todarmal, that is, drew up schemes for effective tax collection. This system, Raja Todarmal, when we talked about him, he was serving under Akbar. This system enriched state treasury. The state also gave loans to poor farmers. This assured in progress in agriculture, trade and industry. So with this, we have come to the end of the chapter. Children, make sure each and every topic in this chapter is very important, and you need to know each and everything by heart. Anything which you have not understood, please note it down, and we will discuss it later when the school reopens. Now, on Friday and Saturday, we will be uploading the written work of the chapter. Please make sure that you do the required question and answers neatly in your fair notebook. And on Monday again, we will start with Medieval India Composite Culture. Till that time, stay safe, stay blessed. Thank you.